Okay, well, let's get started. So, aloha everyone for joining us again for today's Mink Wahine Leadership Series event on building your second team. My name is Brittany. I am the Senior Program Manager for the Mink Center for Business and Leadership. So excited to have all of you. Before we get started, I would like to introduce all of you to our Center Director, Colleen McAlooney. Oh,
Thanks,
to say a
Brittany.
few words.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Brittany. Aloha and welcome, everyone. Thanks to all of you for attending MCBL's Wahine Leadership Series on building your second team. We want to thank our VIP sponsors, Central Pacific Bank, First Hawaiian Bank, Hawaiian Electric, Hawaiian Telecom, and HEMIC, and of course to all of this morning's attendees for your continued support of this program. As the only women's business center in Hawaii, the Patsy Teaming Center for Business and Leadership is proud to support our local women leaders in their personal and professional growth and development. Please remember that the MCBL team wants to provide you with the relevant tools and takeaways to support your leadership journey. Applications are now open for our Leadership Alliance Cohort 7 for those of you who are interested, so please reach out if you have any questions regarding that. And we're grateful today for today's facilitators, Mary Fastenau and Karen Tan, and our moderator, Melly James, for being here to share their experience, wisdom, and expertise. Last but not least, I want to give a big shout out to the team, Brittany and Haley, for helping to get this organized and supporting our event today. So thanks so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And so again, like Colleen had mentioned, wanted to really thank our team, for helping with supporting this event. So as all of you know, my name is Brittany. And so I'll be helping to moderate the chat area as well as the Q&A section. If you do have any questions, please be sure to put them there. And then our panel will be addressing all of those questions throughout today's program. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, please be sure to contact Haley. So Haley will be dropping her information into the chat area as well too for your reference. So you can either call or email her. But if you have any other issues, please let us know. Now, without further ado, I would love to introduce all of you to Melly James. Melly is the co-founder of Mana Up, and also too, she is one of our amazing advisory board members for the Mink Center for Business and Leadership. And sorry, Melly, well, one last thing before I pass it over to you. Also wanted to let all of the attendees know that today's webinar, as all of you know, is being recorded. So we are going to be forwarding over a link to today's event after today's program. But again, if you do have any other questions, please let us know. And thank you so much. Melly, handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Brittany. Great to see you all. And thank you for joining us for today's leadership series. So I'd love to introduce Mary Fastenau, who is the partner of Anthology Marketing Group, as well as Karen Tan, who is the president and CEO of Child and Family Service. So welcome to our panelists. And I really, I can't imagine, this topic is just so important right now. And I think for many of us, through the pandemic and with the shifting of roles and companies and positions and all of our perspectives shifting, I think it's really important as we look at second teams. I know for myself at Mana Up, with a lot of our companies that are rising, really looking at what does it take from not only from a next gen leadership standpoint, but also from the actual company. What does it mean to have a second team? So I'm going to launch off with a kind of a broad question for our panelists, really around, why is it important to build a second team and what are the benefits? So kind of diving into what does that mean for you? What does that look like for you? The benefits, and then we're going to jump into a whole bunch of different questions. I'd like to remind everyone, please, in the Q&A, we'll try to get to as many as we can. So thank you again. Mary, we'll start off with you.
Oh, and I was going to learn from Karen's wisdom. So thank you everybody for having me today. And this is a topic that I'm quite passionate about. And so I think building a second team is important in a lot of different areas. It can be important for succession planning, which I think all companies should be looking at, particularly smaller companies who have, people who are at the head and really need to have people who have those skill sets behind them that can continue. So that whole succession planning. But I also think that it's really critical today as we look at a changing labor force, and people want more responsibility. They want to know what their career path looks like. And sometimes building a second team, although the joke at Anthology is I never want anyone to leave, but sometimes building that second team is allowing people to have a platform for their own professional and personal growth in different ways as well. And so I think that those are two of the absolute critical things. It's both employee satisfaction and the future of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mary. Karen.
Oh, you couldn't have said it any better, Mary. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here and appreciate the opportunity to share as well. As Mary said, this is near and dear to my heart. You know, we as leaders, all of us have had people mentor us, coach us, encourage us to be that second team initially, and then to take on higher level leadership roles. And so that's why it's so important, because I don't think I would be in this seat today if someone didn't invest in me. So it is my responsibility now to pay it forward and invest in others, give them hope that they can actually move up in companies and move up in opportunities, and just be really appreciative of the opportunities that are there, and that they don't have to move to other companies to get those. We can find them within, and we want to keep our team as much as we can. And then someone said to me, oh, we invest so much in our team, and then they move on to other companies. And it's like, good, because we want people to be skilled and we want them to bring that to Hawaii across. So doesn't matter if it's in our company or not, but we want to really rise up, and especially women leaders. So important.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, Karen, around what does it look like to be building up that next generation of leaders? And there's kind of two different aspects of second team. There's the more second team that's for the function of the company, and how are you actually creating a really amazing, effective team that's thriving. But also, what is that approach when you're looking at it from a next generation leadership? So can you share a little bit more on how you approach these differently, or how you approach things in general, not only for team succession planning, but also for next generation leadership?
I mean, it's so important, because when someone comes into our organization, they're figuring us out, we're figuring them out. And it's like, do they fit with our core values? Are they a part of who we are as an organization? And then it's really important to identify, be very vocal. I see this skill set in you. I see you have some natural gifts in leadership. How can we come around and support you to grow in that area? If we don't, shame on us, because I think a lot of women leaders hesitate to step in, hesitate to say, oh, maybe I do have that skill set. And so we need to encourage that. So when I look at succession planning, and even bringing people up into that true second in command kind of level, it's really about identifying those, the skill set, but mostly identifying the attitude. I flock towards that attitude, that can do, mission driven, action, bias towards action attitude, but also someone who's humble and team approach. All of those go into play. But then it's identifying, making sure you identify, have the conversation, talk about it. And I will say that, sometimes a lot of women will say, oh no, I'm not interested in being a leader. I like my job. And I don't take no for an answer when I see the natural talent. It behooves me to push on that, because I think I shared with you all in our prep meeting, I had that opportunity for someone to keep pushing me to actually put my name in and say that I could do it. And so we naturally don't say yes, and we need to be encouraged to do so.
I couldn't agree more. Mary, do you want to share?
Well, I think that one of the other interesting things about, I'm in marketing, and marketing is an idea business. And I think that the different, I make a joke now, I am rarely anyone's target market. So what I think about doesn't really matter. But I think when you're in that idea business, you also, I agree with what Karen said, that also looking at things to kind of kick us in the butt, to make us think about things differently, to make us shape things differently. And certainly in all of our businesses, not just marketing, it's just world record pace of change. And certainly COVID has even made that more pronounced. So I think in addition to finding those leaders, then finding them and giving them permission to share their ideas, even if they go against the norm, because that's how we grow. I mean, I always make the joke that in marketing, if you're not changing, you're dying, because as an organization, because you have to constantly be evolving to fit what the market needs and what clients are requesting from you.
So, that's interesting you're saying that, Mary. We were just doing a panel with the Mink Fellows program around entrepreneurial thinking. We had Peter Dames from Servco and Ruth Erickson from Bank of Hawaii. And
Great
Peter said something,
panelist.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And Peter was saying something about, if you're not getting in trouble, then we're not moving the needle. So, I love kind of where you're going with that around thinking entrepreneurial, pushing and thinking differently. Can you share, some more around the attributes you're looking for and the makeup of a team, or anything more around that kind of entrepreneurial mindset, which we're seeing more and more that people are looking for in terms of, leadership and really creating that strong second team?
It's such a hard question. Thank you for asking, Melly. But I was one of those people, right? I was one of those people who had a great job and just, saw the internet for the first time in 1995, a million years ago, and said, oh my gosh, we have to be doing something there. And so I didn't identify myself as an entrepreneur necessarily, but I think what we're looking for are people who are continuously looking for better ways. And we always joke that there's just some foundational things, and I'm sure for Karen, that's even more critical. There's some foundational things that you just have to do. There's some process things, but we give you that foundation so you can build and that you can have ideas. We also have learned that it's important to have a mixture of people, because we can have some people with great, crazy, off the wall ideas continuously, but then we also have the people who are the executors, who are more pragmatic, but are so well respected. And that's where the combination is really magic, is where you have that respect among each other so that the wild ideas can come out. The executors and more pragmatic people can have a conversation, not to kill the idea, but to make it better. And I think that's really what we're looking for, is that sort of yin and yang of people who fall on both sides, who are both extroverts and introverts, who are executors and idealists. And I think that combination is what makes product, services, and makes the company better.
Yeah, thank you. Mary, oh, sorry, Karen, would you like to add to that in terms of, attributes and really looking at that entrepreneurial mindset as you're building that team and creating that composition?
So one thing that we really love to do at Child and Family Service is have good conflict. And so, I always say, if we don't hear from you, then we can't make it better. And so what I'm looking for are leaders who are willing to put out their ideas on the table, put out even their dissensions on the table if they're not agreeing. And my job as a leader is to mine for that. Pull it out, make sure we've got it, make sure people can speak to it, because like Mary said, then you have that fine, sharpen it, and your ideas become amazing because you have all out on the table. I was once joking that, we're making a big stew. We need to put everything in there. And if you're hiding a rotten vegetable, then we can't season it appropriately. And so we need all the rotten vegetables. And one of the employees said, Karen, I've got like 5 rotten vegetables behind my back. And I'm like, then we need to hear them. Let's bring it out, because that's so important. And I think, when you look at your second bench, you're looking for people who are willing to be a little bit vulnerable and hear their team as well. So it can't just be me, it needs to be a willingness to listen, to hear, to be responsive, to appreciate alternate viewpoints, because then the best product comes out of it.
Can you share, because it feels like, as a leader, how do you start to navigate where people's skill sets may be, or how they can complement as the execution versus like the big hairy ideas, or however, whatever those different attributes are? Can you share some ways that you start to test people, or even be able to have them start to understand their skill sets better? Like, how do you help coach and help them kind of navigate when a lot of times you're saying people say, hey, I'm in my job, I like where I am? Or how do you start to kind of scratch that surface?
That's like my favorite part of my job, is to identify people in our team that maybe have not identified themselves as a future leader. And so I see it naturally. It's like when someone is working on a project and all of a sudden this whole team is following their initiative. Then I pull them aside and I actually give them, I say, did you realize that this whole team is following you because of your idea and your leadership skills? Have you ever seen yourself as a leader before? Do you see the skill set? And most often they say, oh, no, 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 no. That's not who I am. But that's how I start. It's like just calling it out and giving them tangible examples, and then saying, I've seen that. So now let's give you a new project, if you don't mind, to see how we might grow that. And so, of course, they're like, more work. But then it's like, they're kind of like curious, like, oh, maybe I could be doing that. And then you just allow them to blossom and give them feedback and coaching and support. And so it's the natural abilities that then shine. But I think it's important that we do that because we need to hear when we're doing something well and we have a natural talent that maybe others haven't pointed out.
Can you give any feedback or recommendations, as you folks, you and Mary, obviously amazing leaders, and create that environment where you're helping people to figure out where they shine and lean into that and explore more. And I think that's super amazing and lucky, but it doesn't feel like everyone has that opportunity. So if that's not the case, are there recommendations for how someone can, continue to, I guess, develop out more of that environment that could be leaning to more to developing out more of those skills?
Well, we have lots of openings. So you can come work for Child and Family Service. But yeah, I mean, so, even the Passy Mink Center for Business and Leadership, anything you can do to put your name in the hat and see what kind of growth you can find outside of your place of employment, if it's not happening from within, is key. Interesting, this morning, we even had a conversation with an employee who just sort of feels stuck. Like, I don't know if I'm really in the right position anymore. I've been here a long time. I'd like more opportunity or maybe something different. And so I think it's also important to voice that and not let it fester, because when it festers, then you end up leaving and going to a different company potentially and still not being happy versus seeing what could happen within your own company. So being vocal about your desire to be a leader and grow into that role, I think, is key. And I would say if where you're currently at doesn't respond to that, then maybe it's not the best place to be, because you want to work for a place that's going to really maximize your talent and build you up.
And I agree with Karen. And I think one of my theories in life is that a job is when it helps you and it helps the company, and together you're working really well. And the company might change or you might change, and it doesn't make it bad. I mean, how many of us have the same friends we had in kindergarten? We change, we evolve, companies change, and people evolve. And so one of the things I try to do is to not make people feel bad about it. If it's not a good fit, then let's just talk about it. Can we make it a good fit, or should they be looking somewhere else? And I totally agree with Karen. We have what we call, Karen, it's funny you said that, we call it the no fester rule. If something's really bothering you, you have to say something, because otherwise we'll never know until you're walking out the door and we're like, well, what did we do wrong? And so I think, and in Hawaii, that's particularly difficult because people don't want to rock the boat. And so giving people the freedom to do that. And also, I think it's a natural tendency of women to not want to, well, I'll just accept this and I'll move on. And so we were laughing. We had a conversation yesterday about it. We now have amazing employees who are asking what their career path is. And sometimes we don't know. So it's pushing us to think about those things and to be honest, but to talk about those things. And so finally, women are doing the things that men have done since the beginning of time. What is my career path? What is my next step? What do I need to do? And we need to embrace that and really push us as managers.
So Mary, I want to make sure I ask this question of you. How do you kind of scratch the surface and start to tickle out, or however you want to make that term, looking at people's skill sets. 'Cause I think a lot of it's also based on culture of the company, and how do you really develop out that culture that's more defined, that can then really kind of create that pathway for the skill sets, and how you're making sure people are having that more exploratory or like discovery mindset.
Yeah. Melanie, have you been in our internal meetings lately? Um, because I think, when we take a survey of anthology employees, what they say, why they like it here, of their team members, it's always that question. So when COVID hit and we all went remote, we had to sort of look at, and we're still looking at and still reevaluating, how do we have that culture where, because it's easy when you're in the office, you can stop by someone's office if you've seen some behavior, or you've noted something, just that, the water cooler, the hallway conversations are really easy. And I think we have to be more mindful as managers now, in a world that's become a little more transactional, because we're in Zoom, we're doing this, we're going from meeting to meeting, we don't have time to think. And so what are we doing to keep that culture? And do we need to redefine that culture? If we know the value system, but the way that we executed that value system was different when we saw everybody every day than it is when you have permanently remote employees, when you have those kinds of things where the world is, in my opinion, finally going to. But how do you shape that culture? And it's hard. I think it requires more from managers to very intentionally seek out employees, to check in more regularly, to have things where you can create that sort of feeling of, yes, this is a place where it's okay to voice my opinion, and to move forward. But it's not easy.
Yeah, you're totally right, especially with everything becoming more remote. I know we talked about at our panel prep around core values, and establishing those, as we don't have as much face-to-face time. We're not in the office together all day as we were. Maybe that's coming back, who knows? Maybe the culture shifted, it's become more transactional, etc. How do you folks, and Mary, Karen, I'll jump over to you, really look at your core values. I know that you talked about the HOPE acronym, which really helps to drive decision making, and truly the values that are important to the company, that can also drive, of course, culture. Can you share more on that?
Yeah, so a few years ago, we came up with this HOPE acronym, really looking at our shining star employees and how do they show up every day. And what we saw is they show up with humility, ownership, perseverance, and engagement. And so that spelled out hope. It was beautiful. We were so excited that it actually had a word to go with it, because that's what we do all day at Child and Family Services, bring hope to our community. And so, we actually hold ourselves accountable to that, whether it be remote workers, supervisors, the second in command, all of us are held accountable to the HOPE values. And so what we talk about is, rather than targeting the person themselves, just say, hey, that wasn't so humble. Can we talk about it? Or I don't see perseverance showing up when you answer my email and say, I have no idea, go figure it out. What we want to see is ownership, where we say, I have no idea, but I can figure it out with you. How can I help? And so those behaviors are what we hire for, and what we hold each other accountable for, whether it be remote or in person. And when you look at that second group of leaders, it's really about making sure that they own and have those core values, whatever your company's core values are. They have to live it. They have to believe in it and show up that way. And then it filters all the way through. Where we've kind of seen bumps in the road is when someone in that second level doesn't have, or maybe they don't attribute those core values, and they show up in a different way. And then we have to walk them out of the organization, because it's just not who we are to have different scenarios. So for example, we had a leader who was just yelling at people. They were really stressed and they just weren't super kind. And that's not who we are. We don't yell. And so, we gave some opportunities to correct that. But as a second in command, that leader needed to, part of that second team needed to show up the same way I show up, the same way all of us show up. And so it just, it's those opportunities to really look at what are the core values, how are you going to hold them true at the highest level all the way through the organization, which means we all have to show up with those core values in mind.
And I think it's so important, especially as these kind of second team and next generation leaders are coming up, it kind of creates some guidance, right? Because you're not always going to be just to their right or just to their left where they can ask that question, especially as the company grows. And they're starting to make decisions, really kind of looking internally at their values and making it aligned with the company's to feel more confident making these decisions. Mary, can you share a little bit more on the core values? I know for you, you've had, anthology, and of course now you're part of Fin Group. And so sharing a little bit how that it has been adjusted, or has it been, and also how do you keep people connected to those values as things continue to evolve?
Yeah. So yes, as you pointed out, Millie, we were now are part of a company called Fin Partners, which is international, has 26 offices around the world. And when we were approached by them, I joke, they had me at their core values because having been in this business a couple of years, we were very firm in our core values. And when I saw that the first thing on their website was work hard, play nice, and it talked about that they never sacrifice their integrity and values in the process, that it was like, whoa, is this really true? And then what they allowed us to do, while we were keeping it all super secret, but we could reach out to anyone in any of these offices who had gone through this process. And universally, they talked about how the value system had remained the same for companies who had been in it 10 years, 1 year, 2 months, whatever it might be. And 6 months into it, it's there. And I really admire how this company has taken those value systems, and it's based on a very firm set of values. It's create a best place to work, take risks, amaze, make a difference in the world, and very much focused on collaboration and commitment to diversity. So it's not a cool acronym. I wish it was, but watching them live it and realizing that that's what we had stood for in so many different places, and to have this, very wide network of very independent companies all come together. And what brings us all together is that value system. So it sort of just reinforced to me in an incredible way the importance of that value system, because that's what unites us now. And when we're interacting with people from other offices, we're all playing by the same rules.
I know it's hard because we're in Hawaii and it's so small, but have you, Mary, seen any where, as you guys have come into this new company where it wasn't working, it was so clear, and you really got to see firsthand by having these clearly identified, it made it a lot easier to understand if something or somebody wasn't working?
Not yet. I mean, because I think they really are so careful about enforcing that. I mean, Peter Finn, the CEO of the company, sends out these emails, and I'll have team members go, "This is amazing. Look at what he does. He's living by all of these things that he talks about." And so I jokingly, I was talking to somebody in the Boston office one time, and they were like, "Sometimes I think they're too nice." But he said, but it's what they believe in. And so it's very, very interesting to watch how they really do live those values, and that people who don't just don't stay.
Karen and Mary, do either of you folks, as you've had these core values, do you come back to them to really help deeply explain, or have people kind of feel like they are living it, in that it's not just something stuck up on the wall? We have a question coming in. I'll pause for a moment because we have a lot of questions coming in, actually. So I'm going to kind of jump into some audience questions. What if someone isn't fitting? How are you folks looking at more deeply explaining what these core values really mean, so that it's not, again, just something put up on a wall. And I think I'll jump into a second question. I'll make this a little bit more complicated. You know, how do you bring on new team members to complement a current team, looking at these kind of core values? Karen.
You know, when we start on a new employee, the first half hour of their time with us is listening to me talk about our core values. And I didn't realize the impact of this, honestly, until just this week. I heard from several new employees, and then throughout, several people just sort of giving me feedback how important and how amazed they were that the CEO would sit in there and talk about core values. And I'm like, well, shame on any CEO who doesn't, because it is who we are. And so we start off people that way. And then I tell them, here's who we are, here's how our core values show up. And oh, by the way, they've been defined by all of our staff across the state. So everyone helped to participate to help us define how do the core values show up at Child and Family Service. And then we talk about, you know, what does that mean for them? And that they were actually hired through the filter of those core values. So not that all of us show up perfectly with them, because all of us have areas that we need to grow in, and that's a given, but that we are all aware. And then I ask a question at the very end after I speak to the core values, and I say, how will you contribute to these values at Child and Family Service? And I don't ask them to reply. I ask them to contemplate that, because they're either going to contribute or they're not. And so we all need to know how we contribute to those core values. And so your second question, which is, you know, so what if someone doesn't have it, or they're really having a hard time with it? That's where all of us, we talked about, you know, if someone isn't living up to the core values, then everyone in leadership should be taking that oxygen out. So if they are not owning something, then every time they're not owning it, someone else should be saying, hey, I don't see ownership here. To where they're just kind of bumping into all these walls and realizing that they're not owning, and everyone's giving them that feedback. So it's not just me giving the feedback, it's everyone giving feedback that this is how we show up and you're not showing up that way. And then usually they're either going to correct, or they're going to say, you know what, I actually don't like that core value, and you really all expect it because everyone's expecting it of me. So I'm going to hell on and go do something else. And that's okay, because I'd rather it not get to a point where we have to introduce some sort of a departure for them, or make it more, you know, more traumatic for everyone. So we want to make it to where you're just kind of bumping around until you realize your bumping isn't very far and you can't get very far, because this is who we are. But starting with core values upon hire, very, very first day, very, very first encounter with new employees, I think sets the tone in the right way. And again, I didn't realize that I said, oh, I want to share core values. It wasn't purposeful. I didn't say, oh, this is the must have to, you know, to implement this in our organization. I just wanted to share it. And now I'm realizing that that is actually what we should be doing, and very impactful.
I love that you brought up those key interview questions, because that was a question from someone in our audience. So Mary will probably ask you the same. How do you ask key questions in an interview to make sure someone's the right fit? But Karen, I also love that you talked about that openness, you know, and how do you create that environment of openness where people are, you know, lovingly calling each other out, right? We're big believers here at Mana Up around radical candor. And, you know, and so you know, being able to kind of lovingly give feedback with you know, not in a malicious way, but doing it quick and with love. But you know, in terms of creating that ability, because I feel like in so many environments, nobody wants to say anything, right? Someone's like not performing, or they're not with a core value, and it's like, ooh, I don't know about that, you know? So how do you create that loving openness for feedback?
Yeah, that is tough in Hawaii, because we're all taught, you know, no, don't mess with things, don't rock the boat. But, you know, part of it starts at the top, I think. So being a vulnerable leader, being a servant leader, you know, and saying, you know, hey, I'm not perfect. So let me have it. I need to hear it. And so it's going to help me to be a better leader for you. So modeling that, I think, is important for any leader at any level in the organization. But also we do something fun, and this is part of new hire too. I don't know if we did it purposefully, but we created a training called Giving and Receiving Feedback. Because part of being able to give is that the person on the other side is able to receive it. And so, just really teaching us how you need to listen first to understand before being understood is a key concept there. So if someone comes into my office and say, Karen, can I talk? I don't go, oh my gosh, what are they going to tell me and how can I defend it? I take a deep breath and I say, wow, they want to come into my office and share something. So my goal right now is to listen to make sure I understand what their concern is. And that's the training that we do. So good fun. And it's funny because we did a survey of the staff during a webinar for our internal staff, and not a lot of them remembered the training. So we thought we better revamp it and have them go through it again, because it is an expectation that we all do that here.
Great, thank you. Mary, I know we have a lot to unpack here, but I'll let you jump in and then I'll ask some more other questions.
There's a lot to unpack in that. And Karen, I love the fact, and you're making me think, gosh, I need to go back to doing some of those things that we did pre-pandemic again. But I do think that idea, I just had a conversation with a new employee 2 days ago saying exactly that same thing, is that, it's open feedback that goes both ways. And certainly I have had team members that I have learned so much from and have changed some of my behaviors, because things that I tend to be very outgoing and very gregarious, and that can just totally off-put people, and learning to temper that, and having my team and going to them for feedback for those things. And then I think that makes the giving feedback in different ways. And I also think it's the identification of times when things don't fit, and not presenting it in a way that's like, we're in an employee review cycle. And I was like relieved, because the biggest compliment someone can give me in an employee review is, I agree with all of those things, and I appreciate that you spent the time to point those things out to me. And I think creating that kind of an open dialogue is really important. In terms of the interview questions, Melly, one thing that I've learned through the years with all the interviewing is to ask questions, and then to always ask them to give concrete examples that back it up. So rather than what they think they should be saying or doing, is to ask some of those questions that are going to get to the heart of some of those issues, but back it up not with just the theoretical conversation, but some, okay, now give me an example of that behavior, or what did you do in that situation? And for me, that's been the biggest thing in interviews that's very helpful, is to actually listen to real world examples rather than hypothetical.
I couldn't agree more. I love examples and stories. So in terms of, have you implemented any more formal, kind of similar to what Karen was saying around, it was, what was it called, Karen? It was ask and receive, or something with the feedback loop?
Yeah, giving and receiving feedback.
Giving and receiving feedback. Mary, have you folks implemented any kind of official X, Y, or Z that can help create those muscles that you're trying to establish more in the company?
No, but I love that idea. I mean, we're trying to do it in team meetings, certainly, but I think that's, yeah, we're going to. I think that's a great idea, because I think that really is important to make it feel non-judgmental.
So I'm going to take a little shift here. I know during our panel prep, we talked about executive coaching and other resources that your different companies have implemented to continue more of these opportunities for people to grow as a second team or into their next generation leadership. Karen, can you share about the one course that you folks have implemented in the company?
Yeah, so we created what we're calling Leadership Academy. And I was blessed to be an Midiar Fellow, and they allowed us to steal freely all of the things that we learned in that process. So we took all of it and we've implemented it in our organization. And so it's really about developing leadership at the highest level, really encouraging employees to even those interested in leadership who are not currently in leadership positions can enroll in our leadership academy. And we make a big deal of it. I mean, we have it over the year. We have a graduation. We have them do experiential and projects, really to grow in the leadership. And I was looking back, and so many of those leaders have moved on to other roles of leadership in other companies now. But I feel like we've influenced them in a positive way, because it really is about being the best leader you can be as you strive to do better. It's interesting though, some of those conversations are really deep, and there's a lot of even what I call trauma that people have experienced in their own careers, where it's like they just have to let it out and share about such horrible experiences in their work or in their past jobs. And so, I think part of also being a good leader, and we've really identified this, is to heal from when you were treated poorly. And so to know what kind of leader you don't want to be, so that you can be the leader that you can be for others. And so that's been really interesting, because I didn't expect that. But people, with poor experiences sometimes come in tainted and not sure that leadership is for them, because they've had a poor leader in their life. And so we want to help them heal from that and move on, and then be a leader for others that then would help others grow into that as well.
Wow, I love that.
love that.
Mary, can you share more on what you folks have implemented and resources? I know a lot for the executive coach side as well.
Yeah, so we have done a couple of things. One is that we've created a leadership team that it's not just the people who run our different groups, but it goes down to that second team, and given them authority and responsibility to do things, so that it doesn't come as a shock when these things happen, but been very transparent with them, and continue to evolve them as a group, both in their individual areas of expertise and that. And then for our next gen leaders, we have done something which, we're only 100 people as a company. So, but we have invested in executive coaching for our next gen leaders, because we believe very strongly, particularly, I might be the problem. So how are they going to deal with Mary? But really to have them get some different perspectives and some mechanisms that would help. Also, we have invested in, if people want, we had one person who went through a very intense conflict management course. And so just really, and then she has shared those things with the rest of us in terms of some of the things that we can do. So we're trying to be much more careful and much more focused about identifying the areas and the people that need growth, and being realistic about what growth we as senior partners can provide, and where outside help and expertise is much more helpful for their growth.
Yeah, it's incredible. I have an executive coach, and I think for us at Mana Up, really seeing some of the skill sets that some of our team members and where we see that could really open up doors for them. I know with some other resources we discussed was, Dale Carnegie's got some really neat trainings around public speaking, around, the sales process. And I think that's a really key attribute that we were looking at for some of our colleagues to gain, not only for presentation, but also conveying ideas and things like that. So are there any other resources that either of you have implemented beyond the executive coaching?
One of the things that my predecessor did for me is he connected me to a whole bunch of other women leaders in the community. And so really finding your mentors, your people that, have been there, done that, maybe a little further ahead in their career than you, that can pour into you their ideas, their thoughts, their learning. That was priceless. I learned so much, and it was, I think that's free as long as someone's willing to do it. And so I've had, an opportunity to pay that forward as well. But that, to me, it's like identifying like who are the leaders that you look up to in the community, and then reach out to them. I think a lot of them would nod and say, yeah, I'll help you. I'll be your mentor. And, and then just spending time maybe once or twice a year, or maybe a little more, and getting feedback and hearing their stories. That's where you really learn. So That's kind of, I think, a low hanging fruit if you can identify someone.
Yeah,
I would agree.
oh
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead,
And
Mary.
there's also MCBL. I mean, I think both for those who are on the advisory board, you know, the advisory board becomes your support system if you're a part of it, also in the cohort learning. So we're always looking for those opportunities, but they've got to fit with what the people want to. You know, we have a person who's looking at MBA, and we're trying to find ways to make that happen so that if they identify those growth patterns, that we can be supportive of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just this perfect example here, although we are on Zoom, in the past they have been in person, and we're looking forward to them being back in person. But to that point exactly, you know, being able to have those side conversations, and meeting people that are totally outside your organization or friend group or your norm, really building that network of women and people with different perspectives that you can learn from. So hopefully we'll be having more events at the YWCA soon, so we can do that. And okay, kind of relating to this topic, we have a question coming in from one of our audience members. Going back to what Karen said about not the right fit, how do you prepare for hard conversations with the goal of helping your team?
Oh, I've had so many hard conversations in my career, and I hate it. I can't say it's gotten any easier. So there's no easy button there. I think where it gets easier is if you give ongoing feedback, and it's not a surprise. I think that's really key. And so it's just sitting down, and sometimes I'll start it with like, this conversation is going to be really hard, and I'm going to need to give you some feedback and how your behavior is impacting the team. So I always focus on behavior, not on the person, and really try to use words that, even though are critical in nature, because I'm having to give that real feedback, are also building up. So what can we do? How do we help? What can you do? And then, you know, again, coaching and being quick for the feedback. So that's really key. Where I've had the most uncomfortable times, it's been when someone hasn't been given the feedback. I haven't done it, or others haven't done it. And then you have to let them go, and they're shocked and angry and mad. But if you go back to the other way and you give feedback early on, and you care for them to correct, you support them in their journey, then surprisingly, when they do have to leave, it's usually a big hug and an appreciation and a thank you. And so more than not, we've had those, but either way, they're not easy conversations. But that's starting it up, saying this is going to be a hard conversation, I think sets the tone, and then they are ready to take a deep breath and hear, why is it going to be a hard conversation? But never easy, doesn't get easier. Something I look forward to when I retire is not having to have any more of those conversations. But you know, yeah. So I'm not sure if that helps, but that's kind of how I approach it.
And I take the same approach, Karen. And one of the things that I agree with you is that I focus on what are you going to do to fix it? Because I think a lot of times our nature is that we want to fix it. And sometimes, you know, it needs to be a mutual process. So to give some ownership of the change in behavior to the person who you're talking to. And I hate it.
Well, Mary, you kind of talked about this earlier around very different attributes. And I think Karen, you touched on it as well, around, you know, female versus male, second team or leaders rising, and that difference in, you know, thinking you need to have all the boxes checked before you can go for that next raise, or that, you know, you're naturally not a leader, or no one's, you know, looking to you to lead. You know, can you share a little bit more on those attributes and how you've seen success in kind of getting over some of those hurdles, and any kind of I guess feedback or advice for many of the women who are here in the audience?
So I think one of the things, and Karen has pointed out really well, when someone sees a leadership attribute in you, even if you don't see it in yourself, because I have the complex, I have the, you know, inferiority complex, imposter complex, enraging full life. But when someone sees that, they've seen it for a reason, and to let them work with you to take advantage of that. I remember one day when a woman who has been wildly successful and had absolute leadership abilities, but she never saw it. And when I pushed her really, really hard. And the day she came into my office and she's like, Mary, I get it. She's like, I just saw one of my team members do something. And you know what? That gives me greater pride than anything I would ever do. And she's like, and to this day, 25 years later, she still has that conversation with me because we identified what it was and then had to push. And sometimes I think that's really challenging because some people, and because I'm a person that didn't always see it in myself. And so I think when you see it, and again, as Karen has point out those concrete examples, it's not just a gut feeling, it's what we've seen from you doing this, from you doing this, from your leadership in this. And that's why, I believe you can do that. And then I think the other thing that's really hard is to give them the responsibility, but then also to give them authority. And it's so hard to not want to step in and say, I can fix it. But if you do that, then you're sort of undermining that coaching. And so I always try to give both responsibility and authority so people feel like they can make a difference.
I love that. And I love your point around not just being general, saying, oh, you did a good job, but actually giving the specifics, because you may have this idea in your head of what that good job was, but really getting into the details, noticing and highlighting really drives those points home around what success or what leadership can look like. And it may be very different than what someone else has in their head. So I love that. Karen, what about you?
So I was one of those future leaders that was like, yeah, no. So my predecessor, he saw something in me 5 years out before he retired. And for 3 years in a row, he said, have you ever, during my evaluation, have you ever thought about being a CEO? And I'd be like, absolutely not. Not interested, wouldn't want to do that. Didn't even see it, didn't even know I would have those skills, and certainly downplayed any skills that could lead me in that direction. But he was persistent and surrounded me with people who gave me that direct feedback and told me what I was doing that would potentially bring me up into a role that now I seem to be thriving in and really enjoy. I don't know why I was so nervous about it, but that's what I look for. And so my response to people is, if someone says to you and gives you specific feedback that they see that talent, now retrospectively, don't say no. Say, oh, I'm curious about that. I'd like to explore that more. But a hard no, which is what I did the first few times, really kind of stalls things. And had I been a little more open, I could have been even a little more prepared, because there would have been more opportunities for exposing me to some things in preparation. But, I would say, if someone says, well, I see this talent in you, I see this skill in you, then, oh, really? But I'm curious, tell me more. How can I grow in that? And then don't say no, because we have amazing women in our community who can rise into these roles. Mary and I will not be here forever. We are wanting to retire someday, and we need amazing leaders to come in. And so say yes, try it out, try something a little small, then build it and build on the experience, and be ready to take it over. Because we took a chance, and we did okay, and no, we're not perfect, but that's the best advice I would have, is just be open to the feedback and really take it in, and be okay saying, oh yeah, maybe I might be willing, or maybe I have those skills. Never saw it, but maybe I do.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. We're at time, but I want to thank both of you, Mary and Karen, for joining us today. Some real nuggets. I've learned a few things, and that I'm really excited to also implement in my company. And I think it's really incredible for all of you that joined us today. Just that first or that second or third step in engaging with others outside of your company, gaining perspective. Ideally, we are going to be in person again, so you get to have those side conversations. And so, yeah, would love to see everybody in person soon. And I think to Sorry, I just had something happen on the side of my computer, so I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, so thank you all for joining us today. I'll let Brittany take it on from here, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Mahalo.
And thank you, Melly.
Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Melly. And again, Mary and Karen, for sharing your time with us. Really, excited to, have been a part of like hearing your thoughts, and also to really, been appreciative of you sharing your experiences with all of us. I know that there's a lot that, we are able to take away from it. So again, we will be sending over a link to today's webinar. So, please look out for our email, and then also to please complete the post-event survey as well. We want to hear from you about what are some other topics that you're interested about hearing about as well. And so just to bring up my screen real quick, so that I can share it with all of you. Let's see. 1 second. All right. There we go. So our next event that's coming up is on engaging and empowering our team. So that's going to be on August 4th. So please be sure to tune in for that. If you can, check out our website for more information. And again, if you do have any questions about this program or any others, please check out our website at mcblhawaii.org. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we will see you next time. Thank you.